Did you know high-quality versions of all episodes of Freedom Rocks are available on DVD? Each DVD contains 3 episodes for just $15. We also have specials that aren't on RCTV or YouTube. You can find links to all of our DVDs on the Freedom Rocks website, freedomrocks.cybermansoftware.com.
Welcome to Freedom Rocks. We're continuing our interview from last episode with the political primer author, Dr. Mark Glogowski. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, Max.
Okay, would you like to give a brief recap of the political worldviews you discussed last time?
Yes, so we talked last time about the concepts that developed the political worldview, the one of direction and approach, and that there were 4 different political worldviews that fall out. It turns out there are no others. Those 4 political worldviews create the 4 political philosophies, and all of history has been guided by 3 of those political philosophies up until the U.S. Constitution, and the 4th political philosophy was then finally implemented. They're very different, and they have a very different impact on people. But what the voter needs to understand isn't so much the impact as how those political philosophies create the structure of society. And by the structure of society, I'm actually referring to the worldview of the person that's placed in the position of control over society. When that happens, the structure of society changes. You don't see the impact of that change until after some solutions start getting implemented. And then when that happens, the features of society start rearranging, and some of them disappear. Some new features will appear. Each of the features have characteristics. Now, to make it a little easier, think of immigrants as a feature. Okay. Now, you can have a lot of immigrants. That's a characteristic. You can have a few. You can have different races as immigrants. So you have different characteristics of immigrants, but immigrants are a feature of society. What happens when somebody implements a different worldview and there's a political change, meaning that the person that you just put in has a totally different worldview of the person that was there before, they're going to take a different approach or a different direction than the previous administration. Up until about 1870 or so, the people in power had the direction and approach that people are basically good and that they're responsible for themselves, and we opened the doors to our country to anyone. The Statue of Liberty, give us your poor and your homeless and your invalids. I don't really actually remember the saying.
You're poor, you're weak, you're tired, you're huddled masses yearning to live free, or something close to that.
Close to that, yeah. That's not the attitude of the people that took the power, positions of power after about 1880, 1890, and they started implementing this immigration policy. Their attitude was, you're not basically a good person. We're going to have to make sure, we're going to have a policy where you get reviewed before you come in here. And our policy is not to take the poor anymore. You're going to have some money, come over with it. And if you're one of the elitists, you can probably get here faster than the poor fellow down in Mexico. So the worldview of the people in power changed, and that changed our immigration policy. And as a result of that change, our whole society has been changing to reflect the worldview of those in power. We are never going to get back to anything that even closely resembles pre-1850 until we change the worldview of those in power. Now, that can be done by them realizing that they're actually implementing something different, or by selecting people that share a different worldview, one that you believe. In the book, I actually use the libertarian approach to the immigration policy just to illustrate the fact that there is a different way and it will work because it has worked in the past. And that most people, when they stop to think about it, it is the right thing to do, even though initially it may be a little impractical. But the right thing to do is to look at people and say, who is ultimately responsible for their welfare? When this person is in another country and they want to have a better life for themselves and their family, and they see the opportunity in another country and they want to emigrate from theirs and immigrate into the other ones, they're not doing it because they want to become criminals. They're doing it because they want a better life for themselves, and they're willing to work hard. They're willing to sacrifice everything they have to come here. It is wrong. To me, it's wrong because my worldview says these are basically good people. So it is wrong when they cross this imaginary line to call them criminals. They're immigrants, they're tourists, they're visitors to our country. They're not criminals. Now, our country currently does not hold to that standard. They claim that the minute you cross that imaginary line, you did so without obeying our laws. So therefore, you're a criminal. But when they're on the other side of that line, our laws don't apply to them. So we have a conundrum here, in that the individual is making the decision to take care of themselves and their family, and the minute they cross an imaginary line, they are no longer allowed to do that. So one of the alternatives would be to stop calling them illegal, stop calling them immigrants. When people come to our country and they're not citizens, or they're not citizens yet, they're tourists. And if they come over with sufficient funds, give them a visa or something if you need to document them somehow, and allow them to stay for a period of time based upon how much money they have. Let them spend it. It'd be like a big tourist industry could open up. At the end of that period, their obligation would be to go back. And if, when they crossed the border, they just left $100 at the border for a bus fare or something, then if they found themselves to be without any funds, they could go to an IRS agent or an INS agent and get a bus trip to go back home. If you treat them as a tourist, they're not entitled to driver's licenses. They should come in with them. They're not entitled to welfare. If they run out of money, they should go home. They're entitled to emergency care, and then for ongoing treatment, they should go home. They're not entitled to an education. They should be home. And if they're a wayfarer, then some generous person a benevolent person could give them a ticket and they could go back home. When they have the funds to come back across again.
Or they go home with the, funded by the $100 deposit?
By the $100, yes.
And if they go home without needing that, they get a refund?
They could get a refund, yes. There's no reason why we would need it. That's the whole purpose of the leaving $100 at the border.
Okay. Well, we're coming up on another break. We'll be right back.
As you may have noticed, you can watch Freedom Rocks for free on RCTV or on YouTube, but it takes money to produce good quality TV shows. You can support Freedom Rocks by shopping at our Cafe Press shop. There you can find t-shirts for men and women, tote and gin bags, coffee mugs, beer steins, food and beverage thermoses, and a bunch of other items Cafe Press offers. You can find our shop at cafepress.com/freedomrocks, all lowercase and no apostrophe.
Welcome back to Freedom Rocks. As always, I'd like to remind you this is a cable access show. That means we don't get Nielsen ratings. So we don't know you're watching unless you tell us you're watching, which you can do by visiting this website at the bottom of your screen, Freedom Rocks. That's Freedom, ROCS, .Cyberman Software. Once again, we're interviewing Dr. Mark Glogowski, author of The Political Primer. And before the break, we talked about immigration reform. Do you want to finish that subject?
Yes, I would, because there's two other steps that are really critical to make this whole system work.
Okay.
The first thing you do is you decide that the individual is responsible for themselves. Now you have to empower them to take care of themselves. If they want to become citizens, the only way that they should be allowed to become citizens is if they can find themselves a job and they work. If they find themselves a job, they become productive members of society. Why would a society that has a productive member not want that person to stay? So I would think that would be a first requirement. If they ran out of funds before they found a job and they go back home rather than staying here, they're obviously showing good intent. And then after they raise some sufficient funds to come back over, they should be allowed to come back and look for a job again. If they did that, a couple things would happen. One of the biggest things is we could end this war on the illegal immigrants, these people that want to be part of our society. The gangs would no longer, drug gangs would no longer have this pool of people that are being abused by our culture of unscrupulous employers that are willing to take advantage of the fact that these people cannot go to the police. The gangs that I look at this group of people as their human resources for increasing their operations. There would be no need for them.
Basically disposable human resources.
Yeah, disposable.
Because they can't go to the police for protection or report crimes committed against them or anything like that.
Right, and so they're basically victims all the way around when they cross that border just because they wanted to have a better life. And we need to put an end to that. And I believe that if you take the right direction, go in the right direction of empowering these people, let them make the decision, and treat them as good, decent human beings, empower them to fend for themselves, then we would actually go back to a pre-1850 situation and people could come over here and find a home. I know I would not want to be in a situation where the reverse was true, where we were trying to get out of our country because things had gotten so bad, and we were faced with the Canadian or the Mexican army basically gunning us down or allowing criminals to gun us down simply because they wouldn't protect us anymore. So I think doing the right thing is actually the right thing for society. Right now we have a movement in the other direction, and they're actually making villains out of anyone that even helps an illegal immigrant, and you can go to jail, and what that's going to do is to actually create societies within the U.S. where they're basically exclusive societies with their own economy and their own culture, and it could destroy the U.S. if we don't change soon.
Okay, and was there another topic you'd like to start?
Well,
wait, are you done? Are you done with immigration?
I think unless there's other questions concerning immigrations, and if people call you up, they can send them in. But I believe that as far as immigration is concerned, if we stop giving them welfare and say, look, you run out of money, you're a tourist, you're a wayfarer, go back home, we would solve California's problems. We don't treat illegal immigrants as tourists. We treat them as immigrants. And we treat them as already having been authorized to stay here, and give them education because they're allowed to go to school, and we give them welfare, and we give them just about everything they need in this bankrupting the country because we're not treating them properly. But we have you can take pretty much any topic, any issue out there, and when you understand direction and approach, you can actually come up with four different solutions to every issue. And you will agree with that one of those solutions is always right, and you will agree that the other four is always wrong. And the one that you agree is right may not be the one that I agree is right. And the reason why is because we share different worldviews. Now, you're not going to change anyone's opinion on any issue until you change their worldview. And a lot of people get brainwashed. Basically, there's some tactics that politicians use. and one of them are PU statements. And they throw these out constantly. Whenever you hear...
Politically untrue and politically unconnected?
Politically untrue and politically unrelated, yes.
Unrelated.
The political untruth is like ammunition, and politicians use it a lot whenever they're throwing something out to a strange crowd and it gets contentious. They will say something like, well, look, all politicians are the same, and they're crooks, so you have to go this way. Believe me, trust me. And if you accept the fact that all politicians are crooks, even for a second, or a split second, what you've done is you've taken your worldview and you've suppressed it. And now you have no basis upon which to evaluate the proposal that's going to be put forward. And a lot of people, because they've seen this political gap and they finally decided they have to do something, and they can't verbalize their worldview and they don't know really what it is, they're very susceptible to political untruths, that all the political parties are the same, and you shouldn't talk politics or religion. You know, so once you accept some of this stuff, then you're easily manipulated. You become a pawn in this political game. And the political ammunition are those PU statements. There's also a political hand grenade, and the political parties are using those hand grenades all the time, and those are the political untrue statements. And that's that, you see this in the judicial candidates all the time. In their campaigns, you will hear the bar association say, you have to vote for this person because they're more qualified than these other people. And you got to vote for the best qualified person. Well, that's a bunch of poppycock.
Hitler was qualified?
Yes. I mean, why would you want the most qualified person in the world that can do pretty much anything they set their mind on going in a direction where you can't stop them because they're perfectly qualified and totally capable of achieving whatever they set their mind on?
I'm going to have to interrupt you. We're coming up on another break. We'll be right back.
Did you know Freedom Rocks has swag? You can help stimulate the economy and show how much you like Freedom Rocks at the same time. We've got t-shirts for men and women. We've got coffee mugs and beer steins. We've got food and beverage thermoses. You can get your own Freedom Rocks swag with the show logo, as seen in the opening title of the show, right here at our Cafe Press shop. That's cafepress.com/freedomrocks.
Welcome back to Freedom Rocks. Again, I'm speaking with Dr. Mark Glogowski, author of The Political Primer. Before we get too much into judicial candidates, I wanted to point out that your political interrogatories seem to more or less parallel the world's smallest political quiz. The personal issues being whether people are basically good or basically evil, and the fiscal issues being who's primarily responsible for the welfare of the individual. Now, I notice your philosophy categorizes people into only 4 different groups. There's only 4 different results because both of your questions are Boolean, whereas with the world's smallest political quiz, you got, I think, 131 different places someone can fall on the map. Would you like to address that?
A little bit, because if you look at these PU statements, and you'll find that you can get people to basically grab onto a solution that is totally contrary to the worldview. If they were to actually look at that solution, or somebody were to bring up the issue again, what would actually happen would they would become emotionally upset because they have a conflict between what their worldview is saying is right and what they basically advocated. They can't explain why there's this discrepancy to themselves. How are they going to explain why they support this solution when they don't actually subconsciously believe it? And so what happens is you have 4 very clear worldviews and then a lot of permutations. And in one of the appendices in the book, I actually walk through different variations of how many, when you watch a debate between 2 people, how many different possible choices are there in terms of worldviews and opinions that you have to sort through. And it turns out that there's thousands, because you can have these both individuals impacted by PU statements, and then you have to sort through whether it's their PU statement bias or their political belief. Some people have been so impacted that you can never figure out what their political belief is because they've suppressed it all their life. And what in reality, when you get into a political position, every politician that becomes an elected official, the very first thing they will do when a new issue hits their door is they will fall back on their worldview. They're no longer impacted by the outside world, and they will come up with a direction and approach to that solution that is consistent with their worldview until someone else comes along and tries to impact that, which is why petitions actually work. So this concept of worldview and being the worldview being suppressed by PU statements is very critical in politics. I forget where we had started going in this direction, but
I was talking about the world's smallest political quiz.
Okay,
because it has 11 different points on each axis instead of just the 2 points.
Right, and when you're not clearly at one of the corners, you have been impacted by a PU statement, and then they also have a category in the center that they call centrists. And centrist people sort of say, well, that's good, I'm a centrist, or I'm a moderate. Well, I view as a centrist as a person that can't make a decision and won't make a decision for some reason. And that's mostly because they don't understand what it is they believe, so they don't want to go out on a ledge until they know. And most moderates and centrists, when they finally do make a decision, they really don't have any more information to make that decision upon than the person that's out there already making the commitment. They will make decisions that everyone else will say, that's just off the wall. That's foundless. I disagree with that. And they'll make the decision when the opportunity is right for them to make a splash or take advantage of the situation. Moderates are actually very dangerous to the political parties, and any moderate in the political party is literally someone that is in the wrong party, especially these days, because the parties have lined up based upon political philosophies. So if you see a moderate in the Republican Party, that person doesn't believe people are basically evil and that the individual is responsible for themselves. They actually adhere to one of the other political philosophies. And what will happen is if you put them into office, they will actually become a party jumper. They will actually leave the Republican Party and go to a different party when they can do so for the betterment of society or something like that and take advantage of their situation.
Okay. Now, the proposal you put forth for immigration, for example, is the libertarian,
right? The
libertarian view.
That's my concept of a libertarian approach. Yes.
Okay. Now, other people may have differing views. I know a lot of libertarians would like to say just tear down the borders and let everyone in, no matter what. And the mere fact that you even suggest having government involvement at all would make you a moderate on that one.
No, because there is a role for government. It's sort of like there's a conundrum in terms of who is ultimately going to make the decisions relative to an immigrant coming into the country. And you almost think, well, you can't be anybody else but the government. These people aren't even citizens yet. But what happens is there's a role for government to play. And that role for government to play, as far as the libertarian viewpoint is to empower the individual, not confine them and constrain them and make life difficult for them, but to empower them so that they can quickly become productive members of society. Okay, and to protect them against ruthless people.
And tearing down the borders and saying, come one, come all, won't accomplish that?
Well, Well, if you tear down the borders and you say, come one, come all, what will happen is we will have a 2 million person tourist industry practically overnight. There will have to be people to attend to this. The economies would boom if people actually approached it from the perspective of, these are good people, let's set something up to help them. They're coming in with money, usually, and they're not paying the money to these criminals that would normally smuggle them over. They'll be coming into the U.S. with the expectation that they will have a reasonable life until they can settle.
Okay. And unfortunately, we're just about out of time for this episode. You've been watching Freedom Rocks. We'll see you next time.
Have you ever played WTF Sudoku?
You mean WTF as in what the f?
Yes.
What the f is so all fired? What the f about Sudoku?
Regular Sudoku is played on a 9x9 grid with exactly one of every digit 1 through 9 in every row, column, and 3x3 grid.
So what?
WTF Sudoku is played on a 25x25 grid with exactly one of every letter A through Y in every row, column, and 5x5 group.
WTF. How can I play WTF Sudoku?
You can play it online at www.cybermansoftware.com/games. You can also buy a book of puzzles on Amazon.com. Just search for WTF Sudoku.
Book? You mean on paper?
Yes, that's correct.
So that's www.cybermansoftware.com/games or by searching for WTF Sudoku on Amazon.com?
Yes.